listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And our main website where you can listen to the X-Zone 724-365, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, also known as the Psychic Eternity. Yeah, right. Let's try this one again. The Psychic Attorney, and he's the author of the bestsellers, Evidence of Eternity and Never Letting Go. He is a world-renowned fourth-generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits. Mark is an Oxford-educated attorney licensed to practice law in Florida, Washington, D.C., and before the United States Supreme Court. In England, he studied mediumship at the prestigious Arthur Findlay College for the Advancement of Psychic Science. Joining me now is Mark Anthony. And Mark, welcome back to the X-Zone. Always great speaking with you.
Oh, thanks, Rob. I always enjoy your show. I always have a great time.
So tell me, what you sent something to us about voting for you, about a certain book. Tell us about that, because of course we're going to vote for you. You're a friend.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that, Rob. Authors Database is running a contest. They call it their cover contest, and Evidence of Eternity was submitted and is a finalist for Best Book in the Body, Mind, and Spirit category. So I'm asking people to vote for Evidence of Eternity, and you can go to my website, which is evidenceofeternity.com. Or my Facebook page, and you'll see on the news section on my website or on any of my Facebook pages, just it'll tell you what to do. Just click on that, and it'll take you to the author's database page, and then you vote for it.
All right, why don't we tell our listeners a little bit about the book so that they'll understand why this book is where it is and why it's so important for the listeners of the X-Zone Nation to vote for one of our own.
Well, thank you. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Never Letting Go, which is a guide on the journey through grief. And while I was on tour of the U.S. promoting Never Letting Go, people began to ask me really poignant questions about the afterlife. Is there a scientific basis for communicating with the other side? How can you bridge the gap between spirituality and science? Do animals have souls? Is there a logical explanation for reincarnation? So Evidence of Eternity came about because of that. And it explains the spirit communication, the afterlife, and the levels to the other side based on science, theoretical physics, and human physiology. And it stands apart from any other book written by any other medium because I'm redefining our understanding of spirit communication based on terms and concepts that I've developed, and in terms of our latest developments and understandings in communications and in frequency transfer.
So as I understand it, Mark, the scientific community is finally saying, well, you know what, there might be something to this psychic phenomenon that we've been poo-pooing for all these years because, frankly, guys, we didn't know what the hell it was.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Rob. And in fact, the top 3 near-death experience researchers in the world have endorsed Evidence of Eternity. And most recently, Dr. Gary Schwartz, who writes books and conducts studies on mediumship and on the afterlife, is interested in studying me and in endorsing evidence of eternity as well. In fact, we were both speakers at the recent Life in the Afterlife conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. So evidence of eternity is not a woohoo airy-fairy book. It explains things in terms of science, and it bridges the gap between the science and spirituality. It's also up for a Pulitzer. I was notified recently by Columbia University that it has been submitted for a Pulitzer Prize. So it's getting a lot of traction, and it's maintained bestseller status since its release last March.
Congratulations, buddy. It's nice to see that people who have worked so hard, so diligently, and so professionally, like yourself, because I think better than anyone else in this world that there's a lot of woo-woos out there. But you are certainly not one that I would put in that category. In fact, I have a lot of respect for you.
Well, as an attorney, I have to approach things on the basis of evidence. And so that's the reason that the book is entitled Evidence of Eternity, because you see a lot of mediums, and I'm not downing anyone, because they're coming from their experience and their backgrounds, and a lot of them have been pioneers, and the quote unquote woohoo and granola people are awesome because they are the ones that put themselves out there. But now it's time to explain this in terms that mainstream science and mainstream community can understand. And the other thing about evidence of eternity is it's not like reading an algebra textbook. This is an edgy page turner, and I address a lot of very intense concepts such as homicide, suicide, losing a child. There's a lot of really, really gritty and edgy things because I've been a criminal defense attorney for a long time, and I've had to deal with the seedier side of society, and I found that a lot of these people are broken and devastated because of grief. And that's one of the concepts that I discuss in great detail in Evidence of Eternity.
What was it in your life that put you on the road to being the psychic lawyer instead of just sticking to law and ignoring the psychic part?
Being a psychic medium is what I am because I was born that way. This is an ability, Rob, that runs in my family, and it's on both sides, both on my dad's side of the family and on my mother's side of the family. And it's fascinating because when my parents met, that my dad just got out of the Navy, and they met at a USO dance. I mean, it's like something out of an old black and white movie. And then they realized, oh my God, we both can see dead people, and it was something that back then wasn't openly discussed.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in a household with people who were capable of doing this, and we didn't think it was weird or unusual, but we kind of kept it to ourselves. And I was attracted to the legal profession. Initially, I was going to go into the clergy. I wanted to be a Catholic priest, but I decided that was too confining for me. So I went into law, and then my ability just kept intensifying to the point where that's what I'm doing now.
Exonation, our guest this hour is Mark Anthony. He is the author of two great books, Evidence of Eternity and Never Letting Go. Life after death communication. What kind of evidence is there that life does, continue after the mortal death?
Quite a bit, actually. In the last 40 years, you've had the whole realm of near-death experience research, which has branched off into survival of consciousness studies. And since the dawn of recorded history, there have been people who've talked about dying, separating from their body, experiencing encounters with loved ones who've passed, going into the light, which they describe as God, even though that word is too limiting. And so Dr. Raymond Moody, who endorsed Evidence of Eternity, started this field of study and began to apply the scientific method to interviewing and analyzing people who are going through this. In more recent years, with evidential mediumship. In other words, when I do a reading for people, it's not just, your grandmother's here and she loves you. It's producing facts, evidence, things that I could not possibly know about a person, what they look like, how they died, their hobbies, their shared memories, favorite songs, there are all types of pieces of information. And I think that with our understanding now of frequency, I've been on a lot of paranormal investigations, and as far back as Thomas Edison, the scientific community, or at least the part that's one time I'd call it fringe. I think it's becoming more mainstream, and Dr. Schwartz is involved with this as well, is developing technology that is capable of detecting the presence of spiritual entities. So I think, Rob, in this century, one of the great advances and discoveries will be developing technology that can actually tune into the afterlife. Now, that technology already exists, in the form of mediums.
Right.
And we all can do this to some extent, just some of us are better at it than others.
Will this have anything to do with Mark Macy, who's been on the show a number of times, talks about interpersonal transcommunication, ITC, where certain electronics where the old tube systems were able to communicate or receive information from the other side?
I think that that's certainly part of the bigger picture of our understanding of spirit communication. So yeah, I'd have to answer that in the affirmative.
How does it work, basically? Like, how first of all, how does someone on the other side know that Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, is trying to find them because Mark has someone in front of them who wants to communicate with this spirit, this soul, who may be anywhere?
That's an excellent question. I explain in Evidence of Eternity a concept known as frequency beacons, to where we're all energetically interconnected with everyone that we love, both on this side and the other side. And the way I describe this, Rob, is think of a three-dimensional spider web, minus the spider, of course. And so if you're thinking very heavily about someone who's died, it sends a vibration along that frequency connection, very much like, when something hits a spider web and there's a vibration. And also in our world, it's like being a parent and knowing something horrible has happened to your child without them calling you or anything like that. You just feel it.
Yeah.
Now, that's not a fluke. There's an energetic connection there. So if you're thinking very heavily about someone on the other side, they pick up on that. And then when they're and also frequency beacons work two ways, because it's like when all of a sudden you turn on the radio and there's a song that makes you think of the person who passed.
Right. Or
all of a sudden you smell a familiar scent associated with that person. These are frequency beacons being transmitted from the spirit to you. So when they're going to be around a person like me and I'm a direct conduit, they can't wait. They can't wait to communicate with their loved ones here. Spirits love to interface and to communicate with people in our world. They're not here to frighten us or harm us. They're here to reach out to us and give us messages of love, healing, and resolution.
What happens if the person sitting in front of you has asked you to communicate with someone on the other side who has already been reincarnated?
Also an issue I've addressed very heavily in Evidence of Eternity. It appears, based on communicating with the other side, that we're more than just a container with a spirit in it, that we're actually multidimensional beings, and our spiritual self extends beyond our body. In other words, the proverbial higher self.
Right.
So think of your higher self as, I'll call it Meryl Streep. Okay, and Meryl Streep knows who the characters in Sophie's Choice are, who The Devil Wears Prada, Iron Lady, and just about every other Meryl Streep movie. Because Meryl Streep has been all those characters. Now, those characters don't know each other, but the higher self does. So let's say you want to talk to a character from Out of Africa, okay, that Meryl Streep was in. But now that person has reincarnated as the Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher, all right? you can still communicate with the higher self aspect of that person, which retains the memories and the personality of the prior lifetime, even though that person has reincarnated. And people say, well, that sounds kind of far-fetched, except for the fact that we're assuming that time as we know it is something that has a beginning and a middle and an end. And spirits, for them, time is timeless. And also, the string theorists have indicated that there's not just a universe, that there's multiverses, and spiritual beings are able to exist in more than one dimension at a time. So that's, giving you the Cliff Notes version. So the long of the short of it is, you can communicate with the spirit of somebody who has technically reincarnated.
If a spirit can exist in more than one dimension at a time, can we, on this side of the veil, also exist in multi-dimensional universes at the same time?
That's that's a fascinating question, and that may also be part of the reason why some people experience deja vu.
Right.
That, gosh, I've been here before, or I've seen this before, or also in people that do psychic readings. In other words, a psychic tunes into the energy of a person, place, or thing. A psychic medium tunes into the energy of a third party, being a spiritual entity. But let's go with strictly psychic beings. According to Einstein and all the string theorists and the theoretical physicists, time has no time, and from an energetic standpoint, everything that has happened, is happening, and will happen. It's going on simultaneously. And it appears that people that do psychic readings are able to tune into that and be able to discern events from the past, what we consider to be the past, what we consider to be the present, what we consider to be the future. And in a deja vu experience, it's very much the same. What's actually happening is you're tuning into or picking up on something that we consider to be the future, although it is coinciding with things that are happening in what we consider to be the present. Henceforth, deja vu. I've seen that before because you have, because it's part of your experience.
Fascinating, truly fascinating. Because you are talking about the use of frequencies, Mark, with the continuous growth of the cellular industry and the multiplexing and duplexing of microwaves and electromagnetic frequencies, is this hindering, or is this increase in multiplexes frequencies and microwaves actually helping spirit communication?
Wow, that is great. I don't think it inhibits it in any way. I know that from the electromagnetic spectrum, visible light, what we can perceive, the way I like to describe this, Rob, is think of a yardstick. Okay, or a meter stick, depending on what side of the big pond you're on. What we're able to perceive is a piece of dental floss that you lay on top of that, and that's visible light. Now, in the electromagnetic spectrum, there's X-rays, microwaves, radio waves, gamma rays, XM. I mean, there's a whole slew of things that we're not able to see with our eyes. And now, according to NASA, a report that just came out earlier this year, there's dark energy, and of course we've theorized, or not me, but the quantum physicists have theorized about dark energy and dark matter. And what they're saying is that over 90%, more like 95% of the universe or multiverses is beyond not just our ability to perceive with our five physical senses, but also our technology. So the fact that there's all these technological advances and microwaves and all these other waves, I think that that's basically just a drop in the electromagnetic bucket, and certainly pales in comparison to what is really out there that we're not able to perceive. And some people look at that as scary. I think it's fascinating. I mean, just because people tend to fear the unknown, the way I look at it is it's a discovery yet to be made. I look at it as more exciting than anything else.
So we have all these microwave towers. We have all these different frequencies. We have you being able to send out a frequency beacon, as you called it, and I think that's a great analogy. But what about the person who is at home, Mark, and maybe they just didn't lose somebody, but somebody is on their mind? You know, maybe they hear the Christmas carol, maybe they, smell the fragrance of a pipe of a loved one. They go to sleep at night. They have a dream. Is that dream real, or is that, well, the dream is real, but is the
contact
experience real, or is it one of a self-fulfilled desire within the person's own mind and psyche?
It could be all of the above. The way to tell the difference, I believe, between a contact experience and a dream is a contact experience feels real, feels like a real conversation. And it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when you wake up, you are convinced of the authenticity. It felt like a real conversation with my mother or
right.
with whoever it is that had passed. Whereas a dream has that surrealistic, nonsensical or bizarre quality to it. And sometimes there's a hybrid. You may be having a dream, and then what happens is, because it's the way your brain works when you're sleeping, you go from the conscious beta state that we're into the alpha state to deeper sleep on the theta frequency. And so while you're in the dream state and you're maybe having some surrealistic dream, all of a sudden your brainwave frequency is adjusting, and spirits can spot this or perceive this in some way. And so that's when they are going to adjust their frequency to align with the brainwave frequency that you're emitting and get a frequency match. And so that dream state, surrealistic condition all of a sudden becomes a legitimate contact experience, because I've observed that happening as well.
Is there total consistency between what the different spirits for different readings have told you about the other side?
Quite a bit. They all talk about reincarnation being real. Mm-hmm. They talk about there is no hell. But they do talk about levels to the other side. And the way I can analogize levels, let's say that we live in AM radio, they live in FM radio, and apparently there's XM radio. So there's different levels, different frequencies. So let's say in the spirit realm, let's call it FM radio, there's lower frequencies, which would be like 88.5 on the FM dial, and then the higher frequencies, which I call the heaven dimension, the white light, 107.9. But as far as like eternal damnation and the archetypal hell, they basically almost laugh when people are afraid of that type of thing. They're very consistent about once you transition to the other side, they're not in any physical or mental pain, and they're never alone, because the other side is a collective consciousness. And I describe this in great detail in Evidence of Eternity, the other side being like an ocean, and each individual spirit is a drop of water in that ocean. Something like the Borg on Star Trek. Very much so. Yes. I know. But unlike the Borg, everyone maintains their individuality. But that's a good way of putting it, because for all the Trekkers out there, and I use the term Trekker, not Trekkie, because Trekkers understand this stuff. The collective consciousness of the Borg, what that is people's individuality is annihilated, and they're basically these automatons. Whereas the other side, it's more like you're a component within a greater whole, but you maintain your own individuality, yet you have access to and are able to interface with all these other spirits. Because I believe, Rob, that one of God's great gifts to all of us is our individuality and uniqueness. If we weren't supposed to be individuals and unique, then we'd be like a school of fish.
Yeah.
It'd be like, oh, there's light, let's go towards it. Oh, there's something else, let's turn here. So, and all react that way.
Mark?
Although in light of recent events going on in the world, maybe it'd be good if we were all like fish, but somehow I don't think so.
Mark, stand by. You and I have to take a commercial break with the news. Exonation, the psychic lawyer, Mark Anthony, is my special guest. www.evidenceofeternity.com. We'll be back on the other side of the news as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
Jeff Gilson didn't go out looking for adventure, danger, or the answers to most of the controversial political intrigues of the past 30 years. But he found all three when he began investigating the mysterious death of his close friend, Margaret Thatcher's favorite speechwriter. Just an ordinary guy living in a small, sleepy suburb 20 miles outside of London, Jeff's questions provoked a powerful response on both sides of the Atlantic. He was shot at, warned off by the CIA, and formed a close bond with one of Israel's most notorious intelligence officers. Relive Jeff's gripping adventure in his fast-paced book, Maggie's Hammer. Peel away the layers of establishment deception and discover, as Jeff did, that his friend was an assassin with British intelligence, that Great Britain has been America's secret hitman for the past 30 years, and that Princess Diana was not the target in that Parisian tunnel. All of this and more when you visit www.maggieshammer.com and find the link to buying this explosive book online. More and more ordinary people feel they no longer have control of their lives. Jeff fought back. He asked the difficult questions. He set out to redesign his own destiny, and you can do the same using Maggie's Hammer as your guide. Don't waste a moment. Buy it today. Visit www.maggieshammer.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
What if Jesus came back now and insisted that we listen to him? How would the world be different if Christians really followed the Gospels? For 2,000 years, we've been practicing a religion. Now it's finally time to get it right. Read Liberating Jesus, new from Roberta Grimes. Meet the Jesus you never knew. Roberta uses afterlife evidence and biblical analysis to prove that Jesus is exactly right. Learning the lessons that he came to teach is the reason we are born at all. Roberta says he has come back now to insist that we actually listen to him so we can begin to use his teachings to unite and transform the world. Liberating Jesus wherever books are sold. Jesus has the answers, and it's not too late. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Good real estate websites are not just about showing listings, but offering visitors valuable information about neighborhoods, market statistics, tips, and personal insights. Luckily, you will find that on Roost, but you won't on many other real estate websites in Budapest. That's why we created Roost. Roost is a website with tailored results for the foreign investor, curated by Hungarian-loving expats who found their home abroad and decided to roost in Budapest. Let Roost help you get started on the right foot. Whether you intend to live, work, play, retire, or simply invest abroad, Roost offers all types of properties in Budapest, from affordable studios to luxury homes. From neighborhood insights like where to grab a great coffee or how to buy property, our team of local experts can answer your questions and speak to the direct concerns of a foreign investor.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
Exonation, the psychic lawyer Mark Anthony is our guest this hour. Evidenceofeternity.com is the website. And Mark, has there ever been a time when you've sat down with someone who's asked you to communicate with a loved one on the other side where a jokester spirit has come in and tried to make the communication?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get the last part. It was garbled.
A jokester, all right, sitting down doing a reading for someone.
Okay.
Okay, and they say, Mark, can you contact my Aunt Bertha?
Okay.
You send out the frequency beacon. But instead of getting Aunt Bertha, you get a jokester spirit who wants to pretend they are Aunt Bertha.
You know, a lot of the religious fanatics that pass themselves off as Christians babble about familiar spirits and it's a demon, blah, blah, blah. And that's the primitive paranoid superstition that my work is to dispel. And Evidence of Eternity dispels the fear and superstition associated with spirit communication. I have never encountered a trickster or a quote-unquote familiar spirit or a demonic entity pretending it's Aunt Bertha or Uncle Joe or anybody else. And, you know, because before I engage in spirit communication, I pray and I ask God to send forth spirits for the highest of purposes to bring messages of love, healing, and resolution. So in the thousands and thousands of readings that I've done, it's always positive, uplifting, healing, and genuine.
Is there any religious philosophy being practiced today that is more negative towards the work that you're doing?
Well, religions are a double-edged sword. The problem is everybody is so convinced that their way is the only way, but all religions are very deeply rooted in spiritual communication, communicating with a higher realm, whether it is God or an angelic entity or a great metaphysical teacher. And what happens is that religions then get manipulated by people because God exists in spite of religion, not because of it. I mean, Christianity is full of examples in both the Old and the New Testament of mediumship and mediumistic ability, and where we're considered good guys, we're called prophets and prophetesses, and where they want to call us bad guys, we're witches and mediums. In Hinduism, Hinduism's extremely psychic friendly because what we consider to be psychic activity is part of the spiritual journey of somebody who's a Hindu. Buddhists are cool because they're just sort of whatever goes as long as it's positive. so it's kind of hard to argue with them. And then, you know, Islam, I don't even really want to talk about. So I'll just take a pass on that.
So we can say then that when someone is in church praying to God or an angel or to Jesus or to any of the saints, that they are actually taking part in a spiritual communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, people say, "Oh, you talk to the dead. That's wrong." Say, "Well, do you pray to Jesus every day?" And say, "Well, then you're talking to somebody who's technically, died and is in the spirit realm." And I find that many of the people that come to me are Catholic because the Catholic religion tends to be predisposed towards mediumship because we have a whole plethora of supernatural beings. You have God, you've got Mother Mary, you've got three aspects of God: Father, Son, Holy Spirit, which God the Creator, Jesus the Sustainer, and the Holy Spirit, which is like the recycler, which sort of, to me, is a parallel to the Brahma the Creator, Vishnu the Sustainer, and Shiva the Destroyer and Reincarnator in Hinduism. So it appears that there are universal concepts which go from religion to religion. And I think what that is human beings that are spiritual and who have communicated with, and human beings have created the Bible, and human beings have created the Quran and all the various religious texts throughout the world. They're very spiritual people who are finite beings encountering an infinite being and beings, and are using a finite cultural means available to them to explain the infinite as best they can through the finite.
So here we are in the year 2015. Why is there still so much dogma and so much negativity when it comes to spiritual communication, especially when everybody in church who prays is doing it?
I think that we're in a period of transition. The problem is you have primitive fear-based religions which are clinging to Bronze Age and Iron Age ideologies. Okay, and a lot of people like to cling to that. And then when you get into the higher teachings of people like Jesus and Buddha, who actually issue moral challenges. I mean, because if you look at the Old Testament and a lot of parts of the Quran, there's all this hate and anger and fear and judgment, and God's insecure and God will strike you down and all this. And then you get Jesus and Buddha and Krishna coming along, who are saying peace and love and understanding. And those are moral challenges to people, and they're difficult. It's much easier to be angry and vengeful and hateful because those are primeval, primitive human instincts and emotions. And what the great spiritual teachers, including Gandhi and Mother Teresa and Omar Khayyam, have taught us is to transcend that. Because here's a very simple test. And I wrote this in a blog that went out in this week. And I wrote that God created love, humans created religion. Which one would you trust? And it all comes down to this, Rob. If you think you're receiving a message from the other side or from God, if that message does not involve love, then it isn't from God. It's from the ego. Because God doesn't hate, but people do. And a lot of very hateful, angry people, and we're seeing this, what's going on with ISIL and with fundamentalist religious fanatics in this country,
right,
that they are looking to justify anger, bigotry, judgment, hatred, and violence through religious belief, and say that, well, God hates this, and God does this, and God does that. And what they're actually doing is the ultimate act of ego. And the ultimate act of ego is creating God in your own image, because then he gets to hate the same people you do.
Over the years, Mark, have you ever read, or I'm sorry, not read, but communicated with a spirit on the other side for a child who has been left behind?
All the time. In fact, earlier today, I was doing a reading for a woman, and all of a sudden I heard a name. And she said, "Oh, that is my stepdaughter." Okay, and then I saw a little baby boy, and the client says, "Oh my gosh, my stepdaughter lost a little boy exactly the way you're describing it, and exactly the way you're describing how he died." And I have also spirits of children who were not carried to term, who either the mother miscarried or in some instances aborted. And what people have to realize is that when a spirit of a baby or a young child comes through, it's not goo goo gaga, because spirits are immortal living beings that pre-exist the body and continue on after. So this immortal living spirit is extremely intelligent, very intelligent, and quite capable of communicating. It's just that they will present themselves as a baby so that we can identify them. Because let's say, you miscarried, a woman miscarried a child, and that spirit shows up looking 35 years old as a mature, sophisticated adult. Well, then it's like, well, who's that? So they give us clues and identifiers to help determine who this is, and then they begin to give us information which is relevant to the person receiving it.
What are some of the best ways, Mark, for people to heal the hurt, the pain of grief?
That's a lifetime process. I think one of the most important things, Rob, and as men in particular are taught to suppress and deny their emotions. I think to a large extent, women are better at processing their emotions because it's socially acceptable for them to express them openly. But I think realizing that you're in pain, realizing that this is a fact of life, and accepting the reality of the death, and through that acceptance, that can then lead you to a place of inner peace. And there is no shortcut. There is no way to fast track this or to avoid it. It's best to confront your grief, endure it, and get through the process. And I say get through it, not get over it, because you never get over losing a loved one. You get to the point where you are able to accept the reality of it, and through that acceptance, arrive at a new normal.
Is it time, Mark, when society looks at death in a totally different light?
I think that with our expanded understanding of survival of consciousness, I think that it helps people to understand that physical death is not the end, but there is still the survival instinct in all of us, and we all still fear the unknown. But I think that the more you study near-death experiences and spirit communication, you'll begin to see that what we call physical life is but a heartbeat in our eternal existence.
So how should we deal with death? Should we celebrate the life of the person, or should we mourn the loss? Or should we do both?
I think both. I mean, you can't deny your feelings. I mean, I'm a medium, okay, and people that I love who died, it hurts. I cry. I'm man enough to admit that I cry when somebody I love dies. But once I get through that initial emotion, then I understand that, and this is something that I wrote about, Never Letting Go, and something that I expand upon in Evidence of Eternity, is it's important to realize that our relationship with somebody that we care about, that we love, when they die, goes from one of a physical nature to one of a spiritual nature. So the people that we love never cease to exist. It's that they transform. And spirits are never upset that they've died, and they're never like, oh, I miss you, because they can be around us all the time and they're aware of what's happening. Plus, because time is timeless, we think time exists because we're born, we grow old, and we die. So we have this artificial mindset of time. But let's say you live another 50 years. Well, in your loved one's reckoning, your loved one on the other side, you'll be along momentarily in their perception. That's why they don't get all bent out of shape at the fact that they're on the other side and you're still here. So when we begin to understand this, does it make it hurt less? No, but it helps us understand it more, and through that understanding, we can cope.
We can cope. Yeah, but grief just isn't. Let me try and get this out the right way. Grief is a natural reaction. We all suffer grief, whether it's the loss of a loved one, whether it's the changing of a job, whether it's moving. Psychologists will say the changes that affect your life in the magnitude of especially loss is grief. Is it better for us to try and understand that, hey, you know what? The other side is going to be with us. We're never going to be alone. And how do we tell someone that there is another side, that the person that we've loved and lost isn't gone forever, that we will one day be together? And what part does religion play in the healing of grief?
It's very difficult to impose one's belief system on somebody else. I recently saw an article where an atheist said that she was tired of people telling her that her son who had died was in a better place and is with God and is with Jesus. It really upset her. Now, obviously, I'm not an atheist, and I believe in God and the other side. But we have to respect other people's beliefs. And I think what is really good about spirituality and understanding life after death and looking at it not just from a clinical but also from a faith-based perspective is that it removes that fear and the finality of it. But we always have to be very sensitive to people around us. On my website, evidenceofeternity.com, there's a section on my website called Grief Management. It's a resource. It's a free resource open to everybody. And there's a page in there under Grief Management which talks about the 10 things to say and to not to say to people in grief. So don't start telling them, your son's in a better place, he's with God, because that grieving parent believes the better place for their son is here with them. And,
exactly.
And certainly I understand that. Yeah. Religion actually plays a very good part in this because all the religions teach us that the soul pre-exists the body and then continues on after the body, right. Just as the laws of physics teach us that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. And that's one of the premises of my book, Evidence of Eternity, is that faith and science are not mutually exclusive, and that in the 21st century, a lot of things that people of faith have believed for thousands of years we're now beginning to see. But for many people, religion doesn't work for them because a lot of religion is believe what we're telling you.
Yeah.
Whereas what I do and what a lot of people who experience communication with the other side, it's that personal experience which makes all the difference.
Mark, how long after someone dies do they try to communicate with the loved ones that they've left behind? Is there any kind of set time that the person is being indoctrinated into the other side before they allow to communicate?
I don't subscribe to that. I know a lot of the new agey people talk about this orientation process and yada, yada, yada. We're an immortal living spirit, and once that spirit separates from the body, the spirit, who we are, our consciousness, transfers to the other side, and we immediately are there. A spirit can communicate with people here right away. And you hear that all the time for people who said that. And in fact, in Never Letting Go, I wrote an account on my mother who woke up at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning and saw her father standing in the doorway of her bedroom, except he looked like he was 25 years old and had rosy cheeks and he was very healthy. And he actually died of cancer. I think he was about 70.
Oh, wow.
He died of cancer, and he died at 7 a.m., so he immediately came to her and let her know that life is everlasting. And I have heard so many accounts of that. So spirits can communicate right away. Whether we're emotionally prepared to get the maximum benefit out of the contact is a different story. Because people say, oh, my son died 3 days ago. I want to communicate with him now. And then they're hysterical crying throughout the whole reading. And of course they are, because they're grieving and they're in pain. They're not really ready for spirit communication because it requires a stabilization of your emotions so you can get the most benefit out of the communication.
Speaking about emotions, do the spirits share any emotions with you when you're communicating? Are they sad? Do they show sorrow? Are they happy? Or are they just kind of?
Oh, they're happy. It's amazing because every now and then I'll be doing a reading for somebody, and let's say the spirit will start projecting to me how much love they had for that person. Rob, it's incredible. It's incredible to feel a parent's love for a child, or a husband's love for his wife. I mean, it's just amazing. They can also be hysterically funny. I was doing a reading for this one lady who was in front of a whole crowd of people, and she's crying, and you know, she and her husband were married for like 50 years, and she's like, I need to know it was really him. And she's crying, and I was giving her all kinds of evidence. She goes, but I need to know. She goes, what did I give him for his last birthday? And it came right out of my mouth, a headache. And she looks at me, she goes, why, that son of a, and I go, ma'am, she goes, now I know it's him. And she's crying, and I mean, the audience was just hysterical. And what it was, she and her husband had this contentious relationship where they sniped at each other all the time. I mean, they loved each other, but they were together over 50 years, and he always used to make fun of her and tease her, and she loved it. Okay, and when that came right out, that was exactly the type of thing he would say to her, and then she knew it was him. And so they can say really funny things. They can say very poignant things. One time, and it's only happened a few times where I've had a spirit get angry because I was doing a reading for somebody, and she was so depressed that she wanted to take her life, and her parents came through, and there was a surge of anger that they said, don't you dare do that, you know, and they were angry because they wanted her to get a grip and not cut her life short. And that's a very rare instance. And it wasn't like they were angry or malevolent towards her. They were angry because they were still being parents.
I see.
It's like,
Mark, as always, time goes by so fast when you're with us, my friend, but please let our listeners know all the information about the voting and how they can vote.
My book, Evidence of Eternity, go to my website, evidenceofeternity.com. In the news section, it'll say Vote for Evidence of Eternity. You can follow me on Facebook because the author's database cover contest, Evidence of Eternity, is a finalist in the Body, Mind, and Spirit section. And I would like to ask all the wonderful listeners of the X Zone, please vote for Evidence of Eternity.
Well, we certainly will. Everybody here has already voted for you, my friend. And I wish you much success, Mark. Don't be a stranger. You're more than welcome here any time. And I just wish you so much success because you, my friend, make a lot of people believe. And when they believe, all is possible. So thanks very much for joining us, Mark.
Thank you, Robin. And I'll be in New York City Saturday, December 5th at the Edgar Cayce Center, and they can find out about that on my website, Evidence of Eternity, as well. Thank you to all your listeners. God bless you, and happy holidays.
God bless you, too, and we say Merry Christmas around here.
All right, Merry Christmas works for me.
Take care, Mark. X-Zone Nation, my guest has been a good friend of the X-Zone. Mark Anthony is also known as the Psychic Lawyer. www.evidenceofeternity.com is the website. Just follow the links and vote for his book, Evidence of Eternity. I'll be back on the other side of this news break at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
Listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, radio's authority on the world of the